Welcome to my guide to moving to New Zealand. So now we're going to talk about where to live. Of course, this is going to be different for everybody. If you do end up getting a job offer before you move to New Zealand, that is really going to control where you end up moving to. What I'm going to do in this section is give you my recommendations for areas that maybe you should be looking for jobs in. And these recommendations are based solely on my personal experience of living in New Zealand and exploring these cities. So the first one is Wellington. If you haven't seen my videos before, you probably don't know, but I am absolutely obsessed with Wellington. I think it is an amazing city, an incredible place to live, but it is expensive. You probably can find a higher paying job in Wellington, and there's going to be a lot more jobs because it is New Zealand's second largest city. I do have a few vlogs of exploring Wellington, so I'll link them above and down below if you guys want to check it out and see what Wellington looks like in person. My second recommendation for cities is Christchurch. I absolutely fell in love with Christchurch. I think it's probably the most affordable city in New Zealand for a bigger city. There are a decent amount of jobs, not an endless amount. It's a growing city. It has a lot going for it. There's tons of craft breweries and restaurants and shopping. It has everything you could ever expect from a city. And again, I'm going to link a video above and down below. Actually, I'll link a couple because I've made a few on Christchurch. If you're interested in learning more about that area, check those out. And then the third city that I would recommend in New Zealand is Dunedin. We haven't lived in Dunedin, but we've been a few times. Again, I'll link them above and down below if you guys want to know more about the region. But again, I think it's such a charming place to live. It's a university town, so if you're in academia, it might be a great place to live. And I believe it's relatively affordable as well. I'm going to recommend a few towns if you're not into the whole city living thing. The first one being Hamilton. Hamilton is really close to Auckland. It's about an hour and a half away, and it's also very close to the Bay of Plenty. So you have no shortage of options for exploring. I found Hamilton to be very quaint and cute. Lots of young families are living there. The second town, or really it's a region that I would recommend, is Hawke's Bay. Hastings and Napier are the areas where my partner and I have explored the most. I really love the charm of that area. I thought, again, there was a lot of nice young families there. The weather is quite decent in that part of New Zealand, and it has a lot of rustic charm. The third town on this list, which is an area I haven't personally been to, but it's been recommended to me so many times, and that is Palmerston North. So do your own research on this. Again, I can't really speak to what the area is like. I've just heard really amazing things. And the fourth town on this list I wanted to recommend is Rolleston. So this is super close to Christchurch. We were going into Rolleston pretty frequently when we were living in Burnham, which is quite close to Christchurch as well. And it has all the things you'd want from a smaller town. It's got stores and amenities. And again, it's really close to Christchurch, so having that accessibility is key. Now let's compare the South Island to the North Island. I think the South Island is better for outdoor adventures, things like skiing, hiking, adventure sports, mountain biking. Not that you can't do that on the North Island, but it's just more of a focus on the South Island. North Island tends to have a more mild winter, lots of gorgeous beaches. Some areas have amazing hiking too. And I definitely don't think the South Island is better than the North Island. I just think they're very different. Because you have cities like Wellington and Auckland on the North Island, you're going to have a lot more jobs to choose from. And if you're going to be moving to New Zealand to start a business, those are the areas you're probably going to want to start a business in because you have a lot more people to serve. It does seem like the South Island has less expensive homes, probably just because there's less people down here and less demand. Now let's talk about logistics of actually moving to New Zealand, like actually packing up your life and coming here. So the first thing that I would think about, something that I had to go through and I really struggled with, is what to do if you have pets. So I have a pet back home in Canada. I have a cat. She is about 9 years old now. And luckily enough, my brother was able to take her in while we're here and we're traveling. But if you're going to be moving to New Zealand for a longer period of time, or you want to move here permanently and you have pets, you're going to have to consider this and look into this. It is extremely expensive. You can expect to pay a minimum of about $10,000 per animal to get them here. It is a long journey for most countries, and they also have to go through a quarantine process of about 30 days. So that means they're going to get here off a plane, they're going to go directly into quarantine, and they're going to be secluded there. Another thing to mention is before you even start the process of getting your animal to come to New Zealand, they have to get so many vaccines before they come. Like a year to 6 months before you even come to New Zealand. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of preparation. And if you have pets, especially if they're younger and you're going to have them for the rest of your life, this is a huge decision, a huge amount of money, and a huge stress on that animal. Really take this into consideration if you're planning on moving here permanently. The next thing to do with logistics is, are you going to sell everything or are you going to bring it with you? Of course, it's going to be less expensive if you can sell everything you own, move here with a couple of suitcases, and then start fresh. What I will say though is things are expensive in New Zealand, so if you do have a lot of very nice curated furniture and you want to bring it and you're going to be buying a nice home when you get here, it might be worth looking into shipping it over, especially for a long-term permanent move. Now let's talk about how you're going to get around when you do move to New Zealand. If you're going to be buying a car, I would budget between $5,000 and $10,000 for a used vehicle. Of course, if you have more expensive taste and you want to buy new, you can go up to any ceiling, but something like $30,000 is probably a good budget if you're buying new. Public transit in most larger cities is quite decent, although it can be unreliable at times. If you want to move here and stay in whatever city you're going to be working in, I think you'll be okay without a vehicle, but if you plan on doing any kind of adventuring or going away every weekend, a vehicle is really essential. I'd also like to note that there are lots of cities and towns in New Zealand that have a really good cycling network. You do find people out cycling all the time, all year round, to and from work, to and from activities. People are just always out and about, which is amazing. Now we're going to roll into currency. So what do you do when you get to New Zealand and you need money? My number one recommendation for this is to get yourself a credit card with no foreign transaction fee. I always recommend the Brim Financial MasterCard if you're Canadian. This is the one that I personally use. I've been using it in New Zealand for the past 7 months. It has a pretty good cashback program. I'm not affiliated with them or anything. I will leave a code down below, just like a buddy code if you guys want to sign up and you're from Canada. Brim, if you're watching this, please reach out to me. I would love to work with you, but this is not sponsored. This card also has no annual fee, so that's another thing. If you can get a similar card that has no annual fee, everywhere here takes Visa and MasterCard. It is by far the easiest way to move here and be able to pay for your everyday expenses. Once you do get here, one of the first things you want to do is get an IRD number and a bank account. I do have an entire video on this, so I'm going to link it above and down below if you want to dig into it further. That video specifically covers people who don't have a permanent address or a job offer. It's going to be a lot easier of a process if you have either or both of those. So just do a little bit of research online. Essentially, you can apply for both of them online and potentially even have them set up before you come to New Zealand. You can bring some physical cash if you want to. There are a lot of places in New Zealand that are completely cashless and won't accept cash. But if you're going to be going to like a farmer's market or going to some obscure kind of smaller town areas, you might want to have a little bit of cash on hand. Or if you're going to be purchasing a vehicle and you need it right away, that can be an easy way to just put some cash in someone's hand and get a vehicle like within the first few days. So really think about what you want within the first, let's say, month, and then work back a budget with what you're going to need in cash before you actually have New Zealand dollars coming into your bank account. If you're going to be moving to New Zealand on a more permanent basis, you're really going to have to research things like retirement accounts. If you're from Canada, RRSPs, TFSAs, how are you going to sell those investments, close those accounts, move it all over to a new country? There's a lot involved. That is something that we're not going to get into in this video. Definitely talk to a financial advisor and an immigration expert to make sure that you're getting all those accounts closed and moved over properly. You might actually need to do all of that in person before coming to New Zealand, so definitely do your research here. I also recommend that you have about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in savings before you move here. Especially if you don't have a job lined up, you might need to lean on this money for everyday expenses. Now let's talk about healthcare. If you want to get free healthcare in New Zealand, you have to be a citizen, a resident, and a few other exceptions, but for the most part, you have to be here permanently to qualify. If you're going to be here on a temporary visa, like a working holiday visa, you will definitely need travel insurance. This is a requirement of most visas. I personally use Genki, and it costs about 82 Canadian dollars per month, and it covers almost everything. It's also nice because it is a monthly fee, not an upfront annual fee. I'll link it down below. Totally not affiliated with them whatsoever, but I've had nothing but good experience so far with them. I think they're a German company. You will become eligible for free public health care if you're on a work visa of 2+ years. So what do you do if you come to New Zealand and you need to see a doctor and it's not an emergency and you don't qualify for free health care? Well, it's a bit of a pain, I'm going to be honest. I did have to go and figure this out because I needed a prescription for something in a shorter frame of time. I ended up finding this thing called Practice Plus. It was $95 to have basically a phone consultation with a doctor, and it was the same day, which was amazing. It did take me a pretty long time to actually find this option. I had to research it for a while because the information just wasn't readily available. So hopefully me talking about this helps you if you come here and have an issue. I called a local doctor's office, like a general practice. They had a 4+ week wait, and they were only taking on new patients that lived within that area. So I'm assuming that you have to live within a certain kilometer range of a doctor, and that doctor has to actually be taking on new patients in order for you to get your own like family doctor. There really aren't that many doctors in New Zealand that have the capacity to take on new patients. So definitely something to keep in mind if you have health concerns or you're going to be going to the doctor frequently. When I was on the phone with the person at this general practitioner's office, she told me that the alternative was to go to emergency and sit and wait for 6 hours to talk to a doctor for just like a simple prescription. So I did everything I could, researched everything I could to finally find this Practice Plus thing, which helped a million. Like I got the prescription same day, everything was so quick and easy. But New Zealand does not have walk-in clinics. If you're from Canada, you might know there are walk-in clinics everywhere. You can basically just walk in. Usually the wait time is less than an hour. Sometimes you can make an appointment. Sending people with minor issues to emergency is ridiculous. New Zealand does have a healthcare crisis for sure. Do a little bit of research on this, guys. It's really not talked about a whole lot, but most of the doctors and healthcare workers in New Zealand are leaving for Australia. They are not getting paid enough here, and the working conditions are pretty awful. So this is a really big detractor for me in making a permanent move to New Zealand. No country is perfect. I mean, the Canadian healthcare system isn't perfect either. And the last thing on this list I wanted to talk about is that I really recommend you travel to New Zealand before making a permanent move here. If you want to come for like a year or two and just explore and travel like on a working holiday visa, you don't need to come beforehand. But if you're going to be moving here permanently, please, please, please come visit first. New Zealand was nothing like I had expected. There were a lot of things that shocked and surprised me and that made me feel like I had this crazy blown out idea of how perfect New Zealand appears to be when it has flaws just like every other country. So definitely come and visit, go and travel, get a feel for your prospective cities. If you've been researching, watching this video, and feeling like you have a place picked out, come and visit, check it out, get a feel for it, stay a few nights in whatever city that is, and see if it's a place that you could see yourself living in long term. If you can, travel in the off season so that you can save a bit of money. And then you can also see New Zealand in a non-perfect time. See it when there's not a ton of tourists, see it when the weather isn't great, and see if you can get through that very rainy and windy season. It's also worth mentioning that New Zealand is really far away from everything. It's really far away from every other country except Australia and a few small islands. If you like to travel, if you like to go to places like Europe and the United States and Asia, Southeast Asia and Tokyo and all these places, you're going to be on a plane for over 10 hours pretty much no matter where you're going. New Zealand is not a good country to live in if you want to be traveling abroad frequently. It's just incredibly expensive and very far away from everything else. So I hope this video has given you guys some good ideas on moving to New Zealand and what you can expect. And if you do decide to make New Zealand your home, I wish you the best of luck with the move. And of course, leave me comments down below if you have any questions. I will do my absolute best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys really soon in the next one. Bye.